Hey, it's ARTFX, this is bass design number 32, and we're gonna be doing another operator tutorial, and we're gonna be looking into how to make sounds like this. So that sounds pretty cool, right? You can use that in a build-up or maybe at the ending phrase of a drop, you know, to transition into the next section. It's made completely an operator, and it's actually built out of 2 layers. So I'm gonna turn everything off, just like I do with all my tutorials, and we're just gonna run you through from the start. And I can turn this one off. Let's focus on the first layer first. It's an operator, and I can just do that. It's an operator, and I'm using the 6th routing option. So you can see that A is going straight to the output, B is going straight to the output as well. Then C is actually controlling the frequency of B, and D is again then controlling the frequency of C. So we kind of like get a double parallel layer thing going on right now, where we can use the operator A to be just a plain sine wave, which is going to be the sub of the sound, and then B, C, and D are going to create the mid-rangey part. So I've made a sine wave, just it's just a sine wave, and let me just undo the automation as well. So this is just a sine wave, and layered on top of that is another oscillator. Now I've drawn this little thing, and you can see I'm not using the first 2 harmonics. So this one is actually a little higher in pitch than the first layer because we're not using this first one. You can see if I bring this up, it turns kind of like into a sine wave over there. And if I just bring that down, we get this really cool wave shape. So just playing around with that gives you completely different sounds. That is basically the main layer for the mid-range part, and into that I'm feeding this one, which also again a custom shape, which, well, it looks pretty much like a sine wave, and I can show you how I did that. By default, if you draw a wave like this, it's going to look a little bit like that graph, so that's okay. I mean, kind of like results in that kind of sound. But I brought this repeat up, and it's kind of, I'm not exactly sure what this is doing, but if we just bring it up to 1, I don't know, it just gives it a slightly different sound, especially in the higher harmonics. So I kind of like the sound of that. Now I've also brought the coarse value of this one up to 10, so it's again really high in pitch, and that's just as with the bass design tutorial I did. I think it was 31, the last one. I used the same technique. It just adds that nice crunchy high end on top of it. And then I'm using operator D, which is controlling the frequency of that higher pitched layer, but this one is again set to a coarse value of 1, so it's gonna add some more low rumble to it. And again, I'm using this kind of custom shape where I'm leaving out the 2nd harmonic, and I'm adding just a little bit down here, the upper harmonics, that'll probably add a little bit more of that crunchy high end that you hear. In the oscillator tab, I can see, let's see what I've done here, if I've done any crazy things. The envelope is pretty much straightforward for the sub. I might be able to just bring this up to, let's say, half a millisecond, just so that we don't get any clicks at the start of the sound. The 2nd one is also pretty much the same, and it's just a default envelope. The only thing I did here is I turned on the repeat as well, so just by default get that kind of sound, and I brought this repeat up to 2. Completely changes the sound, so it's definitely worth checking out those things. And you can see I brought the phase up to 19%, so that's actually going to change where in this waveform it's going to determine where in the waveform, in this particular waveform, you're going to start whenever you press a note. So if I bring this up, you can actually see that that graph is moving, and well, it's basically just starting at the left position of the graph. So if I just bring that down to 0, that's where it would normally start. I bring that up to 19%, it just starts slightly in a different position in the waveform. So that's a cool thing to do. Just adds a little bit of a different kind of sound to it, I guess, and that's just, it's gonna make your sound more unique and also more difficult to recreate, I guess. So then the second or the third operator, the repeat is set to 1 over here. I think we already talked about that. And other than that, I think it's pretty default. The envelope is, however, pretty interesting. This is what is creating that sound at the start. I mean, I do have some pitch bend in it, but without the pitch bend, you're still gonna hear this interesting thing at the start. That's actually completely coming from that second operator, or the third operator. So this envelope is controlling that shape. And if I, for instance, say I want to loop this, so let's loop it with a 1/4 rate, now we're going to get that same thing but looped. So you can really hear what it is doing. But I don't want to use that, I'm just going to set it to none. So we just get it once. So that adds a little bit of character to the start of the sound. It's definitely going to help to make it sound more unique as well. You can see right here in the notes, I'm adding this pitch bend. So I'm starting on a B1 and I'm going up to a B3 really quickly, and then it's dropping back down again. So that's creating that interesting pitchy kind of thing. That's without, and this with. Just adds a little bit more of a different kind of sound to it. The fourth operator, I've also changed the envelope a little bit, and you can see I'm well, slightly different values. It has a longer decay time and a slightly shorter attack, but that's just going to change the way this is going to sound. This decay is quite slow, so over the course of this entire node, this level is going to drop back down slowly. Just going to add slightly different character. I don't think it really matters because this one closes down quite fast, so I don't really think the decay time on this one matters as long as it is longer than the one that is being used here. So I think this just, it sounds pretty cool, right? So on this one you can also see that I've set the phase to 63%, so it's much higher than the other ones. So it's definitely, well, starting at a different position in the waveform because of that. And I think that's it for all the operators. So there is some automation going on in this one, and I'm gonna turn the automation back on. So if we just take a look at what is going on with this automation, if I open up the mappings, well, first of all, you can see right here on the operators itself that every fine-tune knob is connected to a macro. Now these are all connected to macro number 1, which is this one. Now if I open up the mappings and switch to my Ableton without a webcam, like that, you can actually see what I'm mapping to these macro knobs. So these bottom 4 are these fine-tune knobs, and you can see that they're all set to the exact same value except for operator C. So that's this one, the high-pitched one. And that one is actually set to a value of 960 instead of 1000. So that means that when this knob is going to go up, because it starts at the same position, right? So when this knob is going to go up, everything except this third operator is going to be in tune. This third operator, however, is going to move slightly out of tune, creating some phase cancellation. And the more we automate that macro knob number 1 upwards, the faster that phase cancellation, that movement is going to be. So if I just turn off the filter as well, and the LFO as well, let's see how it sounds. So you can hear it's going up and the higher it goes up, more of that detuning is going to be audible. And it might not be too audible right now, but it's definitely going to be more audible when we're going to add distortion. Now, I think I've also automated one of the envelopes in here. Yeah, the envelope of operator number 3, operator C. The sustain is also being automated, so it's actually mapped to this macro knob. And if I bring up the automation lanes, so these are the automation lanes. This bottom automation lane is the fine tune, so that's macro number 1. It's called fine tune right here, but it's actually the macro knob that is just moving up. The next one, this is the macro for the sustain. So you can see from this part until here, the sustain of this third operator is going to come up. So I talked earlier about that it doesn't really matter how long this decay time is, right? Well, that's true, but as soon as this sustain is going to come up, then this decay time does matter, because when I'm bringing this sustain up, we're actually going to hear more of this third operator again, even though it has already closed down to its default value of, what is it, minus infinite dB. So it's going to be brought back up when that sustain level is going to go up as well. So that will bring up the detuning kind of sound as well. So that's definitely what I was looking for. Then I think I've added an LFO just to the frequency of operator D. So the frequency, that is, well, a different word for pitch basically. The frequency of this one is going to move back and forth in pitch. So it's going to go up and down and up and down. And it's going with a speed of half a bar. So half a bar just going up and down in pitch. And that's just going to add even more difference to the sound. You know, every time I play this, it does sound the same every single time, but over the course of this sound, the sound is just gonna morph and change and evolve and just do interesting things. And that's just all because of that modulation that I'm doing here. So after that, I'm adding a filter, and this is just a notch filter set to the OSR mode, so we get the filter drive. I brought the filter drive up quite a lot, it's 15 dB. Turn on the hard shaper as well. And that hard shaper is brought down actually, so that's just adding distortion to it, just giving some more crunch to the sound. And the envelope for the filter, you can see about 220 milliseconds on the attack, about 1 second on the decay, and the envelope is set to 100%. So just right at the start of the sound, this filter is going to move upwards, and then it's going to move back down again. But this filter itself, the cutoff, is also mapped to a third macro knob, and that is this third lane, that one. So you can see it's just going up and then dropping back down. It's nothing too crazy, that's just what it's doing. With that filter, however, we get a much louder and a much more aggressive sounding thing. Listen. So that's kind of like the start, you know? So I added the utility and I kind of like brought it down for about 10 dB, so that's quite a lot. And then I'm adding a filter, which is a notch filter, and this notch filter is being controlled by this automation lane, so that's the filter movement. But again, I'm using the OSR mode, so I'm using another 11.2 dB of drive on this filter. So remember, I brought it down with almost 10 dB. Now I'm bringing the drive up with more than 11 dB, so we're gonna end up at about about 0 dB. It's basically gonna clip and add a bunch more distortion because of it. So I can basically show you what this is doing quite easily by just grouping these two. This is without. This width. it just adds even more movement, and I can't say that often enough. It's really important to add movement to your sounds. So that's basically the first layer. Then we have a second layer, and I wanted to add another layer that just adds a little bit of I don't know, a little bit of more stereo width to the sound. It makes it sound a little bit wider and kind of like also build up a little bit of tension towards the end of the sound. So what I did here is I basically just duplicated the track that I had, and I took all the effects off, and I think that's it. I took all the effects off and I turned off all the operators. That's what I did. I left all the fine-tune automation in it, because it's pretty much well, a really big part of the sound that we're going up in pitch. I could have done it with a pitch bend, by the way, but I haven't done it like that because I found out that the fine-tune actually sounded pretty cool. So we're going up in pitch, and I want that same movement in pitch to be happening on the second layer, of course, otherwise it's gonna sound out of tune. So I've kept that fine-tune movement. You can see that right here. It's the exact same automation, done nothing to it. And I've also done some automation on this filter, which is a notch filter. It's just the same as with the other patch. The only difference is that I brought the resonance down all the way. Oh no, I'd also done that in the first one. So I haven't even changed anything to this. I just automated the filter itself instead of mapping it to a macro knob, I think. Not even mapped. Let's map that to the frequency, see what happens. That's good. Okay, so this is adding even more distortion to the sound. And you can hear this sound is built up out of two saw waves. So I'm just adding these two saw waves, and they're slightly differently tuned. I mean, if we look at the fine tune right here, we need to look at the top two. I could possibly delete these two because we're not using them anyway. You can see that they're tuned slightly different, and that is actually gonna help to well, create a different sound out of this. I'm gonna go and do this one. So you can hear towards the end of the sound that detuning, that movement is speeding up, and that's because the difference between the first operator and the second operator in terms of pitch is changing the longer this sound is being played, and that's because I'm automating that. So when that knob is being automated up, it's actually gonna speed up that movement that you hear in the sound. So that's just adding some cool stuff to the sound, I think. I like it, it sounds pretty cool. And I decided to make this sound much wider by bringing the spread up all the way and then adding a chorus, so that's really widening this up quite a lot. And I then added an auto filter so that we don't have any of this sound during the start, and it's just slowly opening up the low pass filter so that during the sound it's gonna get more upper harmonics and just going to come up in frequency. It's just gonna give it a slightly different sound. So those two are layered. One is set to minus 10 dB, the other one is minus 15.5 dB, and those are then running into a group track. And on this group track I'm doing quite a bit of processing again. First I have a phaser, and this is just adding some movement again. This is just adding some slightly different movement, and the same is happening over here with this one, which is the flanger. So with the phaser it already sounds pretty cool. I guess that should bring up the automation lanes. The flanger is actually being automated. I'm automating the dry wet, and this is really, well, giving it quite this is kind of like creating those harsh higher harmonics that you hear, especially at the start of the sound and during this middle part. So with that flanger we suddenly get this. Hear that kind of like crunchy moving kind of thing in the high end? That's the Flanger. It really creates a cool sound. Now the LFO is also turned on. It's set to a rate of 4, so it's actually just moving back and forth once during this entire sound. Then I wanted to add some ambience to that, so I added a reverb, which is set to about 25% on the dry wet. Brought the decay time up, and I changed this so that the graph does that. So we're basically just cutting out all the low end, and we're just left with the mids and the high end in this reverb. So that's gonna add some ambience to the sound. It's gonna add nice tail to the sound as well. But you know, I want to bring that tail up. I want to make it more audible without actually bringing up this dry wet, because when I bring the dry wet up, it's also going to make the reverb more audible during the during the rest of the sound, and that's not what I want. I just want the reverb to come up after the sound is done playing. So you can do that two ways. I mean, you could automate the dry wet so that it becomes more audible. You just automate the dry wet up towards the end of the sound. That's a way, but it's gonna sound slightly different from the way that I've done, and that's by simply compressing and distorting the sound afterwards. So I decided to add an amp, and this time the only thing I did is I turned on dual instead of mono, so it's a stereo sound, and I brought the dry wet down to about 30%. That's everything I did, and that changes the sound, gives it a little bit more upper harmonics. And it really brings up that reverb as well, especially the high end in the reverb. Then I'm running that into a saturator, which is set to the wave shaper mode, and I'm not adding any drive. I'm just, you know, playing around with these curves until I have something that sounds interesting. And you can really hear this is making it nice and loud as well. I've used a soft clip to basically make sure it's not going to go over 0 dB. And then I added a compressor, which is just compressing the shit out of this. It sounded already quite compressed already, but I just added this just to see how loud and consistent I could get it in terms of volume, and that made it sound like this. There you have it. I mean, I think this sounds pretty cool. It's a nice sound. It's nothing too complicated. There's definitely a lot going on though, but it's nothing too complicated if you understand what is going on. I hope you like this. If you want to see more of these videos, then please subscribe to this channel, because you guys are making me do all these kind of cool videos. I mean, without you guys I wouldn't be doing this, right? So if you want to see more, follow this channel. I want to do a lot more tutorials focused on neurofunk and neurohop and, you know, those kind of genres. I really like the sound design in that, because it lets me do quite a lot with cinematic stuff as well, so I really like that sound. If you want to get some cool samples or some cool presets, on my website there's a web store. So my website is www.artfx-studios.com. On there you can find sample packs and preset packs that are basically created for you to use in your own tracks. You don't have to worry about royalties or anything like that. You can just use those sounds in your tracks without having to care about it. By getting some of those sounds, you're also supporting this channel. You're helping my channel so that I can grow bigger and I can do more videos. I have been doing a sale on my website for the past 2 months, and it's been going pretty good. So last week I decided to extend the sale with another full month. It's going to be running till the end of August. You can get a 40% discount on all your purchases. The only thing you have to do is fill in the code 40K special during the checkout, and you'll get a 40% discount on your order. So that's it. I hope to see you back soon. Peace.